Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Election Night. My name is Ivana Hrynkiw, and tonight I am hosting live election updates here on our AL.com social media pages, and you can always watch them on the website AL.com later on tonight. So these are going to happen every hour. This is our first update because it is just a little bit after 7, I think 7:02, I see here on my laptop, and that means polls have finally closed. It's been a long 12 hours here in Alabama. And today I have two of our columnists. I've got columnist Kyle Whitmire and our guest columnist Cam Smith here to talk about some things we saw today and talk about some things that we're expecting to hear and to see later on tonight. So guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I know this is a big day and a big night for all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So let's talk first about the turnout today. We know that there was record turnout across the state. We know the Secretary of State said that of the 3.7 million eligible voters in Alabama, he expected that 2.5 million and 2.8 million would be voting in this election, either via absentee ballots or today at the polls. We know that some of the lines that we've seen today at the polls have been crazy. Kyle, were you expecting to see this kind of turnout in person today on Election Day?
Well, it's hard to make predictions of turnout this year compared to previous years. Is usually what the Secretary of State uses to make those predictions are absentee ballots. And our absentee ballot situation was completely different this year because of COVID, but we did have significantly more of them, almost more than 300,000 absentee ballots returned. But it remained to be seen until this morning whether that was going to be reflected in in-person voting too, and it did. I mean, we saw lines in places where we've never seen lines like that before. And, some of it, some of the lengths of those lines was due to social distancing, but that doesn't account for all of it. I mean, I would say, we're going to break the record tonight for turnout in an election.
There has also been talk, and this has been nationwide talk, that a lot of the absentee voters were going to vote Democratic. Cam, do you think that's the case here, that most of the absentee ballots were for people voting Democratic versus the in-person voters going Republican?
Sure. And you can see this basically in the perspective on COVID, right? Because when you look at a lot of the recent polling as far as where the issues rank for a lot of Republican voters, the idea of showing up in person to vote isn't a problem. They're not particularly concerned of, hey, I might get COVID. A lot of Democratic voters say, hey, this is a big deal. We need to wear masks. We need to engage in social distancing. And so the opportunity to vote ahead of time and eliminate potential exposure was something that I believe more Democrats took advantage of. Now, is it 80% of that vote's Democratic? Is it 50%? I don't know. But it certainly makes sense with what we know about how the partisan response to COVID is affecting the way voters act.
I think you have another issue in this as well, which is that, today I think a lot of voters got a taste of what a lot of Democratic voters get every election cycle, which is having to stand in line to vote. I've covered elections now for 20 years. We've seen the polling places that we've had to wait on at night because they still had lines out the door. And I think a lot of people who turned out to vote in this election, in person absentee, were frankly afraid that with all the consternation, conflict, whatever you want to call it right now, they were worried about their votes not counting. In-person absentees were significant this year. I mean, lines that we've never seen here in Jefferson County and other places throughout the state. I did it Monday just to see what the experience was like. It was a 2.5-hour wait, and when I walked out, the line was just as long as it was when I got there. So I think a lot of people were eager to vote early and get this over with.
Well, and you talk about waiting 2.5 hours on Monday in those lines. I know that some people, including myself, I went in person today and waited about an hour. So it seems like some of those in-person absentee lines may have even been longer than the actual day of election day lines.
And if you take nearly 10% of the voters out of in-person voting today, I mean, they were that long despite essentially those lines having been reduced by 1/10. This is one of the most wildest things I've seen.
But I think it's a great thing to have. It's absolutely fantastic to have people voting. And so I want to make a real specific point on this. Anybody who's saying, well, more legal voting is a problem for my party, particularly Republicans, saying, hey, that's a problem. I don't subscribe to that. That's something that drives me insane. We need to make sure that people have every opportunity to legally cast ballots. And the idea that more voting is bad for Republicans, that's something that, we really need to second guess. If you're a Republican official saying that's a problem, then you've got bigger issues than whether people are voting or not.
Well, and I think 300,000.
Why do you think that is, either Cam or Kyle, that we do have some people that are having that opinion and that are speaking that opinion that, look, the more people that are voting, Republicans get worried about it?
I'll let Cam answer that question.
Thanks, Kyle. I think that some of the issue is there's a conflation of voter fraud, which is this sort of boogeyman that's out there. And, well, more voting means more voter fraud that benefits Democrats. To be clear, we need secure voting. We need to make sure that people are following the rules, that they are the person they say they are, and that they are legally entitled to vote. But if they are, they should absolutely be able to cast that ballot, and we should absolutely find ways to make it easy for them to do so. And I understand the need to have a secure process, and that's a completely separate issue in my mind from, hey, more voting means more fraud, means good for Democrats, bad for Republicans. That's just a logical jump. It's too far for me. I just don't see that.
I'm going to jump in really fast. I'm sorry, Kyle. I know I cut you off before. I just want to bring this. We just got this alert from AP. The Associated Press has called the race of the presidential race in Alabama, declaring that Trump wins in Alabama at 7:10. I think I got this alert on my phone at about 7:09. So I just wanted to drop that in here. Kyle, go ahead.
Surprise, surprise. I'm curious how many votes have been counted already, but I appreciate their expediency. No, what I was going to say is if those 300,000 absentee voters, especially the ones who voted in person in the past a few weeks, if they weren't able to get any other message across, I think one thing that they did make clear is that there is an appetite here for early voting in Alabama. My parents now live in North Carolina, where they voted. My stepmother went in last week. She got in and out of her polling place in 15 minutes. This is not a complicated thing. Plenty of states do it. And I think early voting is another way to, sort of spread out the pain, maybe the wrong word, but to alleviate this sort of mad rush on election day that results in lines that are an hour long, 2 hours long, 3 hours long, that frankly, a lot of people, they have their lunch break when they can go vote, or they have to vote before they go to work, or they have to vote after they get off work, and they might not have 2-3 hours to stand in line to be able to vote. Long lines are themselves a form of disenfranchisement, and I hope a lot of people sort of got that message today, because what a lot of people in Alabama experience today happens in other elections too. It just doesn't happen to them.
Well, I'm looking at we've got a counter on AL.com on the homepage that will show you, it's a ticker. I think is probably not the appropriate or the perfect word for that, but it's showing the election results as they come in. We have a spot on that homepage where it's got our Senate results as they come in. It's got the percentages of these votes that are coming in for Doug Jones and for challenger and former Auburn head coach Tommy Tuberville. Now, both of those numbers right now are at 0%. We don't have any of that coming in. We do know Trump has already been declared the winner of Alabama. Either one of you, what do you say to people who keep coming in our comments or coming across our website and saying, look, I wanted to vote for Biden or I voted for Doug Jones, but it doesn't matter in a state like Alabama. We know it's going to go to Trump. It is, like I said, 7:09, I think, when the race was called for Trump. What do you say to those people when they say, look, I don't think my vote matters?
Well, personally, I think that winner take all elections, the way we have set up our electoral college, or that our states have chosen to participate in the electoral college in this country, it does send around. If you are a Republican in California or if you are a Democrat in Alabama, it's really disheartening to spend all that time going to vote and then at the end of the night feeling like your vote didn't matter. I think if we're going to keep something like the electoral college, we should at least break up the vote proportionate to how those states' voters participated in that election.
Well, I'll answer the question directly. I think your vote absolutely matters because you participate. I have lived in literally the polar extremes. I have been a Republican in Washington, D.C., in the District of Columbia that is overwhelmingly Democratic. And I've been a Republican in Alabama. And so I've seen the sort of opposite ends of this. And I'm not less inclined to vote regardless of where I am. I think that's part of what we do as Americans. We voice our perspective, and margins do matter. I know that sounds silly, but for example, Democrats in Alabama, if you don't show up, if you say it doesn't matter, then Republicans can look at it and say, hey, this is a wipeout, right? Republicans dominate so heavily that we don't really have to consider Democrats at all. And I think at the end of the day, having the minority party in a state show up and say, hey, we're here and we do care is really, really important, regardless of whether that's Republican or Democrat.
I'm looking at our AP results here for that Senate race I was just mentioning. So far, we have less than 1% of the precincts in. That's less than 1% of the expected vote. We do have, actually, surprisingly, we have Doug Jones ahead here at 72% versus Tommy Tuberville's 27%. Again, that is less than 1% of the vote in. We are going to get to those campaign headquarters from both Doug Jones and from Tommy Tuberville here in about an hour. But before we do that, and before I let both of you gentlemen go, let me hear from both of you. What are your predictions in the Senate race? Kyle, I'll let you start.
I think it will be closer than what our presidential totals look like. I do think it's going to be closer than what I'll predict that it's going to be closer than what the polling has shown the last few weeks. We haven't had a lot of good polling in Alabama. We've had some sort of B-team polling here. But I do think Tuberville will probably prevail tonight, as will President Trump. I mean, according to AP, President Trump already has, even though we've hardly counted any votes.
And has in Alabama. We should probably clarify that.
Right.
Cam, what about you?
I think that this is going to be a clear Tuberville victory, and it's pretty impressive for Tuberville not really running. He basically ran with Trump and said, I'm with Trump. I want to support Trump. End of discussion. I think Jones, because of the judge votes that he took, is a non-starter for most Alabamians in the Republican side of things. They're not looking at him and saying, well, he's sort of this moderate guy, so maybe I'll give him a chance versus Tuberville. I agree with Kyle. It's probably tighter than the presidential in Alabama, but if it's not 9, 10, 11% Tuberville victory, I'd be really surprised.
Well, we are going to find out hopefully in just a couple of hours here. Looking again, doesn't look like that count on our homepage has changed since I just brought it to you. So again, we are going to be live from the Doug Jones and the Tommy Tuberville campaign headquarters here in about an hour. Until then, Kyle, Cameron, thank you so much for your commentary here and for your predictions. We're hoping to see you again later on tonight. But for now, thank you both so much for participating. Everybody, thank you for watching, and we will see you at 8 o'clock.